You're listening to the Fezcast, the Saracens fans podcast, bringing you the independent and unhinged views of the voices in our heads, as well as those of our special guests. To get in touch with us, find the Fezcast on social media and listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube and more. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy this week's show.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Hello, it's Monday after a filthy weekend at StoneX, and I'm here with Barry to discuss the first half of that filthy weekend, which was the men's game against Quins on Saturday. And the first thing to ask you, Barry, is were you sitting in the North Stand?
No.
Yeah, poor sods. I could see them all trying to get into the back row of the North Stand and get out of that howling wind and rain.
Yeah, the best place to be on the StoneX on a day like that is definitely the West Stand. I sit in the East, but we are sat in what we refer to as the wet seats, because although if we look up there is a roof above us, it's not much use when it rains because the wind invariably comes across that southwest corner, and basically we get very, very wet.
It's a bit of a controversial subject because I know some people get very annoyed about it, but at one point when the wind and the rain intensified, there was a sudden, what's the opposite of an exodus, where everybody rushing towards where I was sitting, and I didn't blame them at all. When there were spare seats going, there was no point staying there and getting completely drenched. But the other side of it is, I've got to say, the quality of the rugby on show, considering the elements, I just thought was extraordinary.
Yeah, it was a far higher quality game than we would have expected given the wind and the rain, which must have made holding on to the ball exceptionally difficult. I mean, there are always things that we can pick up on and say, well, we would have liked to have done those better. And I'm sure the same for Quins as well. But yeah, I mean, all things considered, I wouldn't have wanted to be out there it was bad enough trying to watch a game, let alone actually trying to play one in those conditions.
Yeah, you've got a bar of soap being played in very, very high velocity winds. So it was, of course there were a few balls dropped. It was to be expected, but in general it was very, very good. And one man in particular I think he proved that he was an exceptional kicker, and that's Tiff Eden. Two kicks in particular. His first conversion, way out on the far side from me, next to the West Stand, straight between the posts. And another piece of real intelligence was when he was on about the centre spot and kicked a ball that went torpedo-like about head height straight to the touchline. In other words, keeping it right below the wind, a level of control that I thought was exceptional.
Yeah, he had an exceptional game. I believe that the club would certainly like to keep hold of him beyond his initial period, and let's hope they can. There's whispers about a couple of other clubs being interested in him as well. But yeah, I mean, heck of a find again by the recruitment team. You know, that they seem to pull rabbits out of hats regularly on our behalf.
They're obviously got their fingers far and wide, keeping tabs on people. But yeah, there was a lovely interview with him, which I saw on Twitter afterwards. He's clearly having the time of his life and was enthusing about being at the club and playing with the young players in particular. But it's an extraordinary Bly Hearth injury crisis that we've got, with both Louis Johnson and Fergus Burke and Alex Goode out. Thank goodness, touchwood, England don't seem to have done any damage to Alex Lazowski. But at the moment, when he comes back, it's just him and Tiff Eden, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, no one's seen Loz for 4 or 5 weeks, including Steve Borthwick by the looks of it. But yeah, hopefully we can let's talk about what we keep putting together in bits and pieces. We think Fergus Burke is almost ready to come back. Louis is going to be out for a while, and obviously Alex is going to be out for a while as well. We know those are givens, so we're definitely going to need another one of, if not two. But yeah, we seem to have been reluctant over the years to play Loz at 10 again, which is a bit of a shame, because I think he was a pretty good 10 when he came to us. So it'll be interesting to see what happens starting off at Newcastle on Friday night.
Yeah, I think he played a few games at the beginning of the season, didn't he? But he is a very, very good number 10. There was a very good evening on Wednesday, the quiz night organised by the SSA, where a couple of things were notable. First off, one table had recruited Sean Wallace, who was the Dark Destroyer in the Chase, to be on their team, which is a bit like putting out a pub team and having Lionel Messi up front. But another table, the table that actually won, much to the annoyance of Sean Wallace, was the table that included Louis. And apparently he answered all the questions. But one of the questions he did answer to someone is that he's not back for at least a month and he's definitely ahead of Alex Good. And talking of Alex Good, just breaking news today that we've signed Liam Williams as injury cover for Alex Good. Apparently he's injured as he normally is, Liam Williams, but he should be just about back. So we probably don't necessarily need him against Newcastle because as we saw in the game on Saturday, we have forgotten his first name, Mr. Hall.
Angus,
that's the one. And I'm renowned for forgetting names. An exceptional young player. And Tobias Elliott is also a very, very good fullback. He played at fullback for Ampthill. So if Williams is not quite fit, I think we'll be okay with either one of those at Newcastle. But when we come up to Vodafone Bulls, Stade Francais, who thrashed Racing on Saturday, Castres, Northampton Saints, etc., it's going to be good news to have Liam Williams available.
Yeah, I mean, the more people we can have available. I mean, Liam Williams is just quality throughout, isn't he? So excellent news if he is coming back to us. But yeah, December is looking like a really, really tough month for Saracens men, and we're going to need all the available bodies that we can possibly manage, I think, to get through that group of fixtures.
Definitely. And I hope England haven't crocked Elliot Daly too much so that we see him back. But it's very, very Liam Williams, isn't it, to be injured at the moment for a relatively run-of-the-mill type of games and then be there for the big ones. He tended to be like that for us before, to miss a load of standard league games, if you like, but at the finals, absolutely crucial.
He was a player who definitely shone on the big stage, and hopefully we can give him some stages over the next few months, and we'll see his talent and his incredible running style back again.
Absolutely. So we've managed to preview the upcoming games in the middle of a review on Saturday, but going back to it, my impression was that we have got an absolutely exceptional bunch of young backs who almost to a man are built like the proverbial brick Whatsit, very powerful, very strong. In addition, Nathan Mikolov is already at his, I think he's under 21, isn't he, is already good enough to be on the bench and come on for Tom Willis, I think. Already potentially a better number 8 than Ben Earl.
Yeah, I mean, there's players coming through all over the shop for Saracens, and almost everyone looked at the two sides ahead of Saturday and thought we could be in for a long 80 minutes here. Quinn certainly looked far more experienced on paper than we were, and we wouldn't have been surprised if we'd lost by quite a convincing margin. But excellent credit to all the lads, forwards, backs, the lot. They all stood up on Saturday evening and played some superb rugby in between the showers and the gales, and really did. They'll be disappointed they let Quinns get that fourth try at the end and 2 bonus points, but it puts us in a fine position for progressing in the cup again when it comes back round after the Six Nations. If we want to make a go of it, we're certainly in the right position to do that. And yeah, you look at that midfield, I mean, that was just superb. Ollie Hartley, Sam Spink, and obviously Tiff Eden as well, who we've already mentioned. They had exceptional games on Saturday, I thought.
They really did. You're absolutely right about those 2 bonus points. I think we might come to regret those. And it was the one low point of the game, really, because it was a very, very experienced and strong Quins game. And unlike London Scottish, which obviously was, an entertaining match, this was a really good victory for those young players, I think. And you mentioned Ollie Hartley. We're very used to Ollie Hartley powering his way through defences, just bashing through. But the first try, his kick out to an absolutely flying Tobias Elliott was a brilliant try.
Yeah, absolutely. It just demonstrates the skills that we've got in the players that are coming through. I mean, they've obviously got exceptional levels of skill, and to get the confidence to put kicks out like that, especially in the weather conditions, it's brilliant to see, and long may it continue.
Absolutely. Up front, I think that the forwards had got a little bit carried away with their performance against London Scottish, and at times were being a little bit selfish again and running into a brick wall, especially on the line-out drives, when we seem to have line-out after line-out, catch the ball, set up to drive and get absolutely nowhere. And I think it was eventually, I think we learned from that, and even Van Zyl in particular took a penalty and ran with it. And we may have scored after that. I think it was probably more a sign of a very big and experienced Quins pack rather than any deficit on our side.
Yeah, when you've got players of the caliber of Jamie, Mauro, Benner, when you've got your natural leaders in the pack who are not there, someone needs to step up. And obviously, you kind of look at perhaps Fraser and Reece to do that, but they're relatively soon back in their Saracens careers, as it were. So it'll take time, but it will come. I mean, we did stand up quite well, and it just needed a little bit of tweaking and a little bit more leadership on the pitch, I felt. But yeah, we're nitpicking. We've won a game that probably very few of us thought we would win, and we're just trying to polish the stone, as it were, a little bit.
I think that's right. Although it was a tight score in the end, I think we were, after the first 15 or 20 minutes, we were in control of that game. I was very pleased that two players that Matt and I picked out from the London Scottish game, the two trialists, Kennedy Sylvester and Isaiah Moore Iono, I'm rather proud of myself for getting those names right, were picked again. I would say Kennedy Sylvester, the big number 5, again, under 20, I think, or 20 years old. I think, as opposed to against London Scottish, against a really experienced Premiership quality pack, he didn't disgrace himself, and indeed he started well and scored a try. But I think it showed he probably needs another year or two of development, which hopefully he'll get, because he'll definitely be a good prospect. But the 7 who came on, Samoan, I believe, some say he's related to Thea McFarlane, but others say that everybody in Samoa is related to somebody there, had a fantastic influence when he came on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you'd imagine playing for a contract probably does give you that little bit of extra oomph and motivation. But yeah, all the players who came on Saturday really did step up to the plate, and it didn't. Often in rugby, you either start with a slightly weaker side and look to get stronger off the bench, or perhaps you do it the other way around. There wasn't a huge amount of difference between the starters and the finishers or impact players, whatever we're calling them this season. But everyone really did stand out and had a great game, I felt, on Saturday.
And another chance to see Fraser Balmain and his wonderful girth.
Yes, a man after my own waistbelt.
He makes me feel like an athlete, and I'm definitely not. Well, Barry, we're going to keep it short this week because I've had various crises with the internet, as you know, and a tree came down outside my house on Saturday night and took my telephone cable down. So I've had to hot-foot it over to my daughter's here, and the Wi-Fi has decided that I shouldn't be allowed to connect to it. So we're going through 5G, but hopefully this recording has held up and will be of sufficient quality. Thanks very much for joining in early on a Monday. And we'll be back in a short while to speak to Alex about the women's game.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
You are listening to the Fezcast, which is proudly sponsored by the Saracens Supporters Association, and I'm Alison Davis, one of the SSA committee. For a £10 annual subscription, the SSA provides our members with monthly newsletters, virtual and in-person player events, away match ticket allocations, and we organise pre-match gatherings at away matches. We sponsor men's and women's players, and we support the Saracens Foundation Track Club on behalf of our members. On top of all that, every year we have a seasonal SSA badge, which is exclusive to members. Where else can you get that much value for a tenner? Join now at membermojo.co.uk/SSA, or come and see us on match day in the Oasis at the StoneX.
This is the Fezcast.
So welcome back to the second half of a filthy weekend at StoneX Stadium. And I'm here with Alex, who we're really pleased to have back to discuss the duel, or Sarries versus Quins. But first, Alex, how have you been since your debut and what was the reaction to it?
Good. Positive. A lot of it from my family and friends. They seem to enjoy it.
We did guess that because we got some emails to the Fezcast email address saying, we need more Alex on the show. And we did guess it was your uncle or your granddad or somebody. So they were doing a good job.
Yeah.
But how did you find the game yesterday overall?
It was okay. It was disappointing to lose, but it was a close game in the end. We tried, just couldn't get over the line.
It was a game of two halves, wasn't it? Which were in many ways were a different way round to what we expected. When I looked at the team, it was such a strong team. I thought, well, we're going to get a win here, come what may, it's going to happen. But it didn't work out that way, did it?
No, the wind definitely worked against us in the first half because we couldn't really kick at all. They could kick a lot more than us, and then we just couldn't get a hold of it in the second half.
That's exactly right, because I thought our performance in the first half, given that we couldn't kick to relieve pressure because it would just come straight back at us, was actually really good. We were putting together some good passing moves. Yes, there were a few mistakes, but in that wind and intermittent rain, those are going to be expected. But we, in a strange way, did a lot better in the first half than in the second when Zoe Harrison was able to kick it miles.
Yeah, I think Kelsey Clifford did really well to get us going forward. And then also Lottie Sharp made some good breaks, but Harlequin just seemed to hold up their defence really well.
Well, the one thing you can say about them, and this came into play at the end, obviously we came back strongly and perhaps with a bit more time would have won, but Quins didn't let go of possession, did they? They were very, very good at hanging on to the ball.
No, yeah, their game management was really good and their bench was really strong, which helped them.
It was, and they brought on some big girls, noticeably very strong and powerful, and that made a big difference. But for me, there were a number of key incidents or issues in the game. The first was that the Poppy Cleal non-try in the first half looked like a try to me, and I'm told by people who are a lot nearer that they've actually got photographs of the ball touching the ground.
Yeah, when I watched the game back, it did look like the ball was on the ground. The commentators also thought it was on the ground, but it's interesting that the referee didn't go to TMO now that we know they had it and didn't choose to use that.
I assumed that there was no TMO, because why would you not go to the TMO for something as close as that, which in the end would have been a key turning point in the game. If we'd gone level at that point, who knows what would have happened, especially as maybe the Quins' lucky try wouldn't have happened. It was an extraordinary, wasn't it? That long kick that hit the corner flag and bounced back out to a Quins player. You won't see that very often.
No, I think Zoe Harrison was really unlucky not to touch that down. I think the wind definitely played a part in that because they're able to kick it so far.
That's right. I mean, the length on the kick and probably the way that it came back as well. The second turning point for me was the Rosie Gilligan injury, because I was sure that it was going to be a red card, or at least put on reports, because it was an upright carrier of the ball, i.e. Rosie Gilligan, hit in the head with the head of a Quins player who was also upright, going too fast and being reckless. For me, it was one of the clearest red cards I've seen, especially as it resulted in a cracked cheek, I gather, for Rosie Gilligan.
Yeah, the referee said the mitigation was the fact she was spinning out of a different tackle. So it was change of direction, and the Quins played it down a track. But I think that was harsh. And it was unfortunate we weren't able to capitalise on that either. We couldn't score when they had someone in the bin.
That's right. Even though we had a woman advantage for 10 minutes, it didn't seem to make much difference. What it did make a difference at, I think, is after that, we hardly won a line out. And if you don't win line-outs, you can't win games.
I don't know if May Campbell coming on also had an impact on that, because she hasn't played hooker in a while. She's been playing at flanker, so she hasn't had that practice. So that also could have had an impact on our line-outs.
That's right. And it negated the advantage we got from Zoe Harrison's boot in the second half, because there were a number of penalties that she would put in an amazing kick to the corner and we just lose the ball.
Yeah, I think we just ran out of time in the end to get any more tries, and we needed to start putting more pressure on earlier.
Yeah, we definitely did. It was all those mistakes in the first 25 minutes of the second half, wasn't it? We just couldn't take advantage of the wind. Passes weren't going to hand, and as I say, lineouts were being lost. But it seems to be that we haven't really got going this season. As I say, it was a very, very strong team on paper, but they haven't really clicked in the way that they've done in previous seasons, have they?
Yeah, and the 2-week break going into this game doesn't seem to have helped them at all, especially coming off after the loss at Exeter. They didn't seem to have any momentum going into the game. So hopefully we can build that going into the next couple of games.
Well, we need to. We've got Loughborough next, which is not one of the toughest games. None of the games are easy, but it's probably a good one to have. And then not long after that, we've got the real tough one, which is away at Gloucester. So they're going to have to find a way of gelling quite soon, I think, to get. They're definitely not out of it. A couple of, they're not too far off the top two, and a few good wins will put them back up there. But they need to find something, don't they?
Yeah, as in, there's quite a big gap. There's a 9-point difference between us and Loughborough in the table at the moment. But Loughborough have some really good players, so we need to win next week and then away to Leicester the week after to be in a good position to go into the Gloucester game.
I think there was a few things that you wanted to talk about. In particular, Tori Sellers was spotted on crutches.
Yeah, she was on crutches at the game, so we don't know how long until she's going to be back. And especially because Leanne Infante's retired now, we don't really have a strong second scrum half. We've only got Ella, so it's probably we're lacking some depth in that area at the moment, which could be important going forward because it's such a short season. I don't want Ella to get too fatigued.
And unlike in the men's game, where we seem to be very, very good at getting some injury cover, whether it's at fly half or full back, there's not really the depth of the playing talent in the women's game to go out and get that injury cover, is there?
Yeah, I'll be interested to see if any of the academy players step up a bit more from Oaklands College, to see if they're in the squad maybe next week or the week after. But apart from that, it's pretty much just going to be relying on Ella.
I wonder if they go running back to Leanne Infante.
Maybe.
Say, Leanne, please put your boots back on and get back out here. As you say, we did have a very good finish, and in the end, it became an exciting game, didn't it, for a good crowd of about 2,500, and the atmosphere really cranked up. And I think it was just that period when the passes seemed to go to hand, didn't they? And we had the power to get through finally at the line, which we'd lacked up until that point.
Yeah, we seemed to click a lot more in the last 15 minutes, but we, as I said, just ran out of time to get enough tries. But I think the conversions also helped because we got both of our conversions and they got none of them. So it made the score a lot closer than it could have been.
That's right. And as we said before, these games often hinge on a little bit of luck. If we'd been given the Poppy Cleal try and their kick hadn't hit the corner post, and that is 10 to 12 points going in the opposite direction, which would have made all the difference and probably would have seen a much happier result.
That would have been better, but unfortunately, it's just the way that it is.
It is, and often games rest on that. And I forget her name. The flying winger for England wasn't playing for Quins, which would have been a big addition to their team, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Ali Kudum was at the World Rugby Awards. It's good to see her win for England, but yeah, probably didn't need her on the pitch. Wouldn't have helped anything.
No, it wouldn't have helped Saracens. That's a quite a strange decision, isn't it, to go to an awards ceremony rather than play in a big game like this?
Yeah. Well, apparently Jess Breach knew all week because of their podcast they do together. But when she told anyone at Saracens, they wouldn't believe her. And they were telling her, no, she's going to play. And she's like, I have inside knowledge.
Everybody thought it was a double bluff, obviously, that Quins were bluffing a Saracens player so that Saracens would be wrongly prepared for it. That is funny.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what's the game is at home next weekend, is it, or is it away against Loughborough?
Yeah, it's at home on Saturday.
On Saturday. Oh, well, that's good. So not long to wait to get back on the horse, and hopefully they will be back on it and we'll be getting those 5 points, which are either the game in hand or not. We shall see. But either way, it's a challenging end to the season. And I'm hoping like hell that they get both to the semi-final and to the final, especially as it's at Stoneaxe. And it would be a shame to waste that opportunity, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think that's what happened to X last season. They just kind of assumed they'd be in final. They didn't end up there. So hopefully that doesn't happen to us this time.
Exactly. Okay, Alex, well, it's great to chat with you again. We may be handing over after the break to Matt, who's been speaking to some American fans and is going to put that segment in this week's podcast to finish up with. But either way, there'll either be nothing or there'll be Matt. Bye.
Hi, this is Petrus Duplessis, and you are listening to the Fezcast.
This is the Fezcast.
So something a little bit different for the show this week as well. We've said a few times on the Fezcast that we have some listeners from far-flung places of the world. And I think we're still the number one rugby podcast in Colombia last time I looked. I'm not really sure. But two people who are bizarrely big Saracens fans and really showing me up because they're both wearing Saracens clothing today and I'm not. We've got Jarrod, Dyke and Ben Glauser from the Fancy Rugby Yanks podcast. Good afternoon, evening, morning, whatever it is, gentlemen.
Afternoon. Thanks for having us.
Afternoon. Barely afternoon. Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yes, I actually it is a lunch break for these two guys, so we'll cut this short when everyone's stomach starts going. Just to make you jealous. I know it is the afternoon there, guys, but this is a pint in my hand that I've got on the screen.
If I wasn't going back to work, I'd totally be into that.
Yes. Pleasure to have you with us, gents. A very, very general question, and I'm going to just direct it arbitrarily at Jarrod first. You know, for us in dear old Blighty, we don't consider much of America to have an awful lot of interest in rugby, even with things like the MLR going on. So, for you, what made rugby a sport of choice?
I got to play it in high school, and so I was grade 10, sophomore year in high school, and it was so much more. It was so much different than anything I'd ever done, and that's actually the words I hear the most when I coach my kids now. So it was just so much different than anything I had played before. I had played American football, I had played basketball, I had played ice hockey, baseball, but just the contact with the strategy just really did it for me because, well, number one, Ben and I both played the position of lineman in American football. You don't touch the ball ever if you're a lineman. And the second they were just like, you need to carry this ball, I'm like, I carry this thing? I carry this thing. Okay, cool. I'm into this. Let's go. And then overall, as I played more and watched more and, you know, I became a student of the game and realized how awesome this thing is. I was like, this is my thing. This is it. Definitely my thing. It drove my mother nuts because, of course, she's a mom, so she's worried and like, please don't get hurt. And I hung him up a couple years ago. And she's like, finally. So, you know, it was, yeah, it was just something that I'd never experienced before in my life. And really, it's the same, like I said, it's the same thing I get with my high school players. They're all just like, this, why didn't I know about this earlier? So yeah, I'm definitely lucky enough to have played it as early as I did. And yeah, it's become a big part of who I am and my family, my business, and, you know, how I coach and all that stuff. So yeah, really love it. And happy it found me, happy I found it.
Excellent. Is it a similar story for you, Ben, or a little bit different?
Very similar with a couple of differences. So I grew up, same thing, played football, American football, a little bit of basketball, ice hockey, baseball, a couple other sports here and there. And for me, when I didn't start playing rugby until after college. The first thing I noticed when I started playing rugby was, well, yes, this is weird. This is really weird. But second off, it brought elements of things I had done, like the improvisation of hockey and communication, and a little bit of basketball of working the ball to space, and then obviously with football with the contact and the kind of specialization, but doing your jobs and understanding what you're supposed to do on any given play. Like rugby was different because, as Jarrod noted, I was a lineman, so I had a very specific thing to do on every play, but I also had to know what everyone else was doing. So I kind of had to know where my role fit into the grand scheme. And rugby kind of takes that, but now it flips it on its ear because there's no coach saying this is what you're doing this play. It's balls in play. We got to sort ourselves out as we go and learning that. And as I said, I didn't start playing till after college. And it was funny because my teammates were actually happy about that. They were like, okay, you've never played before? This is great. You're at Ben's club. Like, we're going to teach you how to play. And ultimately, we don't have to break you of any bad habits. Their first thing was, as long as we teach you how to scrum, like you kind of get what you're doing. You can tackle. That's not a problem. You can ruck. That was never a problem. It was, what am I supposed to do? And how do I scrum? and so it was a lot of like, here's how you scrum. And I had to learn about that because that was the one weird thing that I never even the lineouts are like weird, but I'm lifting somebody. I can lift. That's not a problem. It was the scrummaging that really was the longest thing to learn.
I mean, you're showing me up really, because my experience of rugby is maybe 2 games of touch and then 30 years of sitting in a chair watching Saracens. So it's the experience is definitely on your side, But obviously we mentioned Saracens. You're both sitting here wearing Saracens shirts, caps, whatever. What brought you to Saracens in particular over any other club?
I led from this one on.
Yeah. I'm going to point at Jarrod on this one too. Like Jarrod brought me to Saracens, so that's the easy answer for me.
Like good stuff.
I can only spot watch certain games, but Saracens were getting good. It was the year before they won their first premiership that I started really watching a lot of professional rugby in England specifically, and I also doing my best to keep track of what American players I could. We had a particular player named Chris Wiles on the team at the time. And
have you heard of him?
Wiles was one of the best ever American players, but also he was obviously a very good Saracens player as well. So
one of many Saracens players who pretended to be American as well.
Yeah. Oh, you listen to him, he's not American, but different story for a different day. That's an American problem in general, but that's okay. I do. Yeah. And then I realized Steve's really fucking good. Like, I'm really liking this. And lo and behold, the next year, Owen Farrell, a baby-faced Owen Farrell, leads us to a final win. And I'm just like, all right, I'm in. Let's do this. And I rode that train for a long time, and watching was hard. I mean, we can talk about that in a little bit, but watching was hard. But when I finally was able to find methodologies to watch as consistently as possible, like I really dove into Saracens hard. I was like, this is awesome. And I really started to really, really, really get into it. I think the year we were the 4th seed and we won the final. We went to Northampton and we beat them there, which I was waking people up because we won that game. And then we obviously went on to win the final. That was one of the first years I really could start to get into it because it became more easily access for us. I was into it.
I'd had like exposure mostly to Southern Hemisphere because we had Super Rugby, and then it wasn't until basically around the time when it became more prevalent, we got Prem Rugby available to us. That was around the time I met Jarrod. So he was like, hey, I follow Saracens. I'm like, well, okay. That's somebody to follow. It's like there's at least someone I can ask questions about, like, because it's not just watching the game. You're kind of coming into the middle of a story, and you have to figure out, okay, what am I missing? Where's the context for this? Why is there a rivalry with Harlequins? What is this? What does this all? How does it all fit together? So because I was such a newbie to Premiership rugby in general. Jarrod guided me on that, and so I was like, all right, well, I'll cheer for the same team. But at least we're on the same side, and we can, he can answer my questions, and there we go.
So it was Super Rugby sort of more widely shown in sort of early days there, or was it?
Yeah, because that was on Setanta. That was the one feed that we could actually get, and it was rare. Sometimes I think we got some Champions Cup through there. Yeah, there wasn't enough to really get a toehold on European rugby.
I mean, obviously, you guys once supporting Saracens, you seem to be pretty much all in. Some of the bigger Saracens fans out there, including for the women's game as well.
Oh yeah, so all this, I ended up meeting my wife through rugby, so it matters to me, and maybe it wasn't as important when I started my rugby playing and following, but the game has gotten to the point where, and this is even an issue in the US with women's soccer, women's basketball, things like that, where there's just a stigma attached to it among the men, where it's like, oh, well, that's, it's not the same game. Like, let's blah, blah. And, there's a different ball, there's some different rules, some of this, whereas rugby, it's you play the same game. You have the same ball, you have the same rules, everything's exactly the same. It's equal. Obviously the resources aren't applied equally. That's something we have to fix, and that to me is big. If you listen to our pod, we're big on no discrimination, treating everyone as equals, as humans, and I think that focusing on the women's game really backs that up, because we want to make sure that game gets as much attention, and especially as much as it deserves, because it's come a long way even the last 5 years, I'd say, and. I don't think you can say anymore, oh, well, the skills aren't there, the speed isn't. No, it's the game is. I watch women's rugby now. It's so much fun to watch, and it's like, if you don't enjoy it just because they're women, that's kind of a you problem. So I think that's the conscious effort that Jarrod and I made, without really even discussing it too much, was no, we're doing this. We're going to make sure we can do what we can do to give it attention and the. Give that game what it deserves, because it's the last World Cup final. I mean, could you ask for a better ending? Awesome. It came down to one final play, all on the line.
I mean, from my point of view, that final could have ended slightly better.
Yeah, I don't think the English were as excited about the way that ended. Us neutrals were very excited about it.
Yeah,
I a lot of what I echo a lot of what Ben said, and really, it's also about growing the game in general. We always talk about growing the game, and I think was it Brian Moore that said something about, like, if we get all the girls involved, then we've just doubled our audience in terms of people that watch rugby. So it's like, why would we not back their sport as well? That doesn't make any sense. And if you watch the game itself and compare the two, the women's game is more watchable, really, especially when you're talking about test rugby. Like, test rugby drives me nuts sometimes, and I'm like, stop kicking the goddamn ball, would you? It's like, and not even that, kicking for post. These women want to go for the throat. They're going into the corner every bloody time. They are trying to score tries, and what's going to get you out of your seat faster than scoring a wonderful try? I can tell you it's going to be a very limited number of kicks that are going to get you out of the seat. You see a wonderful try scored every weekend in this, especially the PWR. So I really emphatic about making sure that they get the attention they deserve, like Ben said. And I help coach a girls team as well, so I also want them to feel like they have someplace to go in this game should they ever want to continue on. And by promoting the game, it helps make that a more attractive spot to go, but also, like, it makes you feel like it's accomplished should you get there, for sure. So it's just, I'm just, yeah, I see no downside in promoting it and help and supporting the women's game, and the fact that you get called an idiot by some loser on the internet every once in a while. But really, we've gotten called worse. So, let's just keep going with it, shall we?
I've coached at the highest level in the US for women's rugby.
Can confirm.
And I've coached some other levels for men's. Right now, I'm coaching a college side that I really enjoy, so it doesn't really apply to them. But outside of this specific job that I have right now, coaching the women was the best. Women were much more like, they were on board. They were encouraging me to give them the best that I could, because they wanted to play the best. The men, it was like, okay, we're going to run this, and they'd be like, no, we're not. I'm not doing that. Why would I do that? Why would I want to do that? And it's like, No, the women were actually receptive to coaching and wanted to play their best, whereas the men are just kind of like, "No, I know what I'm doing," and I'm like, "I played with you, and I'm better than you. I know, I know what you need to do. This is me trying to help you be a better player." And they're like, "F off."
And it's good that, we've established what I did already know, which is you two actually do know what you're talking about. It's not a haven't just dragged in two random American fans here. It's two people that actually played the game coast. Well, yeah. Look, let's get onto the season in general. I'm just going to, rather than pick on any specific games and things that we've had, I'm just going to talk about the season as a whole. And I will start with the men on this one. And you guys, from your perspective, what have you made of this? What is supposed to be a transitional year in our eyes that has been going pretty well.
If you're Fergus Burke, could you have fallen into a better situation? Like, really, the players around them, and yeah, we lost a couple other guys as well besides Faz, but I mean, Billy was ready to go. Like, I was happy to let him walk. He'd become a knock-on machine. So bye-bye. We know Mako can't scrum for shit, so that's not news either. And really, we signed some key guys. I think we strengthened the scrum more. I think it still could be strengthened more, but I'm also not a big raw scrum guy. That's not my thing. I would rather just get the ball in and get the hell away. But really, look at the guys that are around him. Vencale, Lazowski, Tompkins, Alex Good when he's in, Elliot Daly when he's in. I don't know if you could have asked for a better situation for his sake in terms of coming in. And this is a long established coaching staff that knows what's going on, knows how they want the game played, and understands how Burke fits into that equation. And I mean, you still have one of the better ball carriers in the world with Ben Earl, which always helps as well. So I think really this is beyond what I was expecting, but at the same time, it's not totally shocking. I'll take top 4 this year. I'm totally expecting us to finish no better than 8, but at the same time, right now we're running towards top 4, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'd say the same. When you change a position as vital as fly half, especially from someone who has that track record and just the length of his time as being not penciled in but penned in, chiseled in to that 10 jersey in Farrell. There's obviously a transition you're going to make. And I'd say one of the things that has held Sarries back in the previous years, the last couple of years, is their almost Jekyll and Hyde approach to the matches. Whether it's, okay, are we going to be playing this test match style? Are we just going to build the scoreboard through penalty kicks and hope that in the last couple of minutes we can pull one out, which has proven to just blow up in their face almost every time they do it. To the, we're just going to play rugby. We're just going to let it all hang out. We're going to, at the end, we think we can score more points than you. So we're just going to run, try to run it and let our defense do the work to keep you guys off the scoreboard. And that has worked really well. So you'll hear us go off or be excited. And it's usually almost a relief in recent years when they tried to run it, when they just try to play open rugby. And then you're like, okay, they won. Of course they won. They've actually played rugby. This year, I think with that transition, they're out of that, okay, we can rely on Farrell to win this with his boot, and into we need to score tries. And it's almost like all right, Fergus, let it rip. And they have the horses out wide. We've seen that it's working. Let's get the ball to our playmakers and let them make plays. It's a shocking concept, I know, but it seems like Sarries kind of got away from that every so often in the last couple of years. And if they keep that on form or keep returning to that playbook and that strategy, they'll, even with this changeover, it'll work just fine, as we've seen. That's been a surprise, but on both ends, that one, that they've kept up the strategy, and 2, that Fergus is just fitting right in. So it's been great to watch, and it's certainly exceeded our expectations.
I completely agree with that, especially as, I've had a season ticket for quite a while, and I'm sure there was a season where, the Saturday we won every single home game and you go away feeling happy about that. But equally, I think in that whole home season, I might have seen about 4 tries. And you think, well, am I really getting my money's worth? Would I take spending money and spending a day out to see us lose? I probably would if we lose 50 points to 40. So it's, yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there. And
I think that's an issue across the Prem that I think is being solved. I got to say, this year it looks much, much different than it has in the past. As you said, nobody wants to go see an 18-15 game with, what's that, 11 penalty kicks. Like that sucks, right? It's a bad product. I think that whole, like, where's the defense thing is gone. I think people have moved past that and say, no, the attacks are actually pretty advanced. That beats an excellent defense 9 times out of 10, except for a Wolfpack defense, which is set up to defend that. So that's another reason we like Saracens, is that the defense, you can see them adjusting on the fly. And I, like, as a coach, I wonder, how the hell do they do that? How do you actually coach them to be like, all right, we have plan A, but now we also have plan B, plan C in the same movement, within a phase.
Yeah. The game against Bristol this season, that was just, their attack was insane, but our defense, you look at it from a wide angle and you think, does anyone actually know what's happening? But clearly they do.
Yeah,
it's absolutely mad. So yeah, definitely right. And the women's season as well. We're recording this just after a 1-point loss to Harlequins, which really, really hurts. And I don't know what my colleagues who have been reviewing it have said, but we scored a try. Poppies Khalil scored a try, and the referee shut his eyes and called it held up. And I'm still angry about it. And it's not often I do that. It's not often I go straight at a referee, but on this occasion I'm going to. But the season as a whole is pretty tight, I think. And that's, we've talked about it quite a few times on our show over the last couple of seasons. It has all closed up, and it's a really good thing for rugby. But there's signs that we're creaking a little bit, right?
Sadly, the last couple of rounds have not been beneficial to the gals. And like Ben and I were talking about the game a couple of weeks ago, and it's like, who took the Sarries kits and put them on instead of the Sarries? Because I don't know what team that was that went out there down in Devon, because that is not what I expect when I see them roll out there. So it was really disappointing. And even last week, what was her name? Wilcock just had her way on the other day. It's like, and it took us 60 minutes to wake up. It's like, oh man, Austin must be losing his shit. Like I would be if I was the coach. I'd be like, what happened to the team I was coaching for the first 4 or 5 rounds here? Like, this is not the same thing. What's going on? So yeah, problems abound. Hopefully they fix them.
I think the mix of the regular club players and the internationals, it's tough. This year is I think has been and will continue to be difficult because of that, where you don't have a set 23 with, some people moving in and out here or there. It's been, okay, well, 8 of our players that we would normally have aren't available. Okay, well, now we got to work them back in, and some of them need rest. And, how do you move through that? Obviously, Sophie is out, which killer really sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Not that Sarries don't have people to put in there who are excellent, right? But at the same time, a lot of those players are reaching the end of their careers. I don't want to even mention names because it's too sad to talk about like that, where it's like, wow, in a couple of years, we won't have Marley or Poppy or, some of these. And it's not that, we're not that far away from it just because of the way things happen naturally. So there's a little bit of transition there. And I still feel like Saracens are recovering from when they were the king shit of women's rugby in England, and queen shit, didn't have to really do much other than show up, and they were going to win. And now a lot of these other teams have caught up and surpassed. Glauser Harper 3 or 4 years ago was like, okay, whatever. They're a little bit of a joke. Bristol came on strong. Quins came on strong, obviously, and it was like, okay, now they're ready to fight. What are you going to do? How are you going to respond? And I think Sarries are still sorting that one out, where it's like, okay, now we have to actually do work and coach and develop, rather than we've got the system in place to get the players where they need to be, and they just win. So I think that's a good thing, though. More competition breeds, who's going to do better. And right now, Sarries are still adjusting to the new world order as it relates to the women's professional game in England. So yeah, I like that, though. Make it a challenge. Don't make it a we show up so we win. It shouldn't be that way. And I think it's a credit to the rest of the league more so than to the detriment of Sarries. I don't think they've gone backwards necessarily. It's just that everybody's caught up. So now what are you going to do?
We get accused of sitting on the fence a little bit too much on this show. So it's good to have some guests that showing a bit of refreshing honesty. I think it's probably good for us to say, and no blowback for me. That's great.
We'll take it all. It's fine.
Yeah.
Nothing new here.
Let's talk about fantasy rugby now. Where do I start with fantasy rugby? I mean, there's two things that are important here. One is that certainly the English audience for rugby is usually of a slightly older generation than a lot of other areas, which means that fantasy games, other than in football, are still really trying to pick up. And the other thing is that the US does fantasy sport possibly better than it does actual sport in a lot of cases. I mean, particularly, not that I'm an NFL fan at all, but fantasy NFL drafts and things, it's like a religion, right? Just try and give us a bit of perspective of what the sort of fantasy sports market is like over there.
Let's put it this way. I am in a fantasy football league, American football, that started, I don't want to say it, but it started 30 years ago.
This particular league. This is awesome.
We were in high school, and we were like, all right, let's do fantasy football. And I'd heard about it, and this is like, mid 90s, late 90s. And we literally drafted in one of my friend's basements. It was before they even put out draft kits where they'd have like the stickers with the names of the players on it. It was, here's the grid. You're going to write your names on it yourself, like nothing. And we would literally read the newspaper the next day. On Mondays, we would gather the newspapers together and do the stats. So that's how we knew who won. And it was like, you'd have to go to the commissioner and be like, I think your score for me was wrong here. I had one more point than you gave me. This is what I'm seeing. A lot of that's completely foreign now because it's all automated and digital. But all that drove connection to the sport. We'd have arguments. Who's the better quarterback, Dante Culpepper or Donovan McNabb? Well, Culpepper's the much better fantasy quarterback. I want him. And it's like, okay, well, that, we're talking, fantasy versus reality, but those lines blurred. And with rugby, I almost think that there's a more direct connection to your fantasy score with how you played, depending on the player and what the scores are. So bringing it into rugby, I think, would really drive more engagement, especially, as you noted, younger fans. It's competition among friends, and there's a camaraderie. There's good fun around it. And that can bring engagement. And so that's why we focus on the fantasy aspect of it, because that'll appeal to Americans, hopefully, and get more people involved in, you're more willing to pay, what is like a $50 subscription to TRN for the year. If you're like, okay, well, I think I can help me with my fantasy league kind of thing. It brings out competitive juices and also engagement. So definitely something we want to stress. And we've been harping to the premiership as much as, on our little platform as much as we can to make it, for them to invest in it, because it's such an easy, it's not that we feel like the cost to benefit is a low ratio. There's a lot of benefit for not too much cost. And we really want them to drive it more.
This brings in like our frustrations, obviously, which is like, it took the Prem so long to get quote unquote official game. And it's through Ben and I think we'll both agree, like the best platforms that were out there have come and gone, unfortunately, because the Prem were slow on it. And we know someone personally that was really trying to get them on board with it, and they just outright refused to work with him. And had they would have had super rude, they would have had a way better game. I think most of us would agree with that. He did everything himself. That dude was a machine. I don't know how he did it. Bless that man.
Was that the Rugby magazine one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That was a great platform for fantasy rugby. Just the best we've seen so far.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that had to fall by the wayside, because that really could have driven engagement. I think there were like Prem players on there at one point.
Yeah.
Yes, there were.
So it's great now that they're investing in Super Brew a little bit, and they're doing the same thing with that. But yeah, they had a really good product there that they just kind of let slip out of their hands.
They were slow.
I can't tell what reason.
Yeah, neither do I. And we talked about like different levels of playing. Like, there's geeks like myself and Ben and you and our friend George that we'll play the draft stuff because we are just ready to sink our teeth into it. But you also want something for the casual fan, which is I think what a rugby magazine, a Super Brew, is great for, because you just, you pop them in there. My wife played last year. Since then we've had a child, so she took us back seat this year. But I don't think we would have got her into that otherwise. So it's, yeah, you need a little bit of both, and they need to. I really would love to see rugby in general, but definitely right now the Premiership put a little more into it, and they'll get more engagement out of it. I think they'll get more viewership out of it. You just get general interest to come up a couple notches. And where is the downside of that, really? Please explain.
And the bigger takeaway from this is about stats in general, which for some reason rugby keeps tightly guarded no matter the competition. And I don't understand it, because you look at baseball. I mean, all fantasy sports really started with fantasy baseball in the US, which was like super nerds and like, beyond my level of nerddom, where they would do the same thing that I was saying about using the newspaper and going through the stats that are freely published by Major League Baseball. It's very easy to find out who the home run leaders are, who's in 20th place in stolen bases, who's in, who's in 100th place in walks. Do I know who's in, 20th place in meters gained? Do I know who's in 15th place in defenders beaten? Who's in 30th place in tackles? I don't know. What's the record for tackles in a year? I don't know. What's the record for defenders beaten in a year? I don't know. But baseball has made these, they have a 40-40 club. You hit 40 home runs, you steal 40 bases. That's like an amazing feat, because it takes two different skill sets to do. Like the numbers in baseball have become beyond just facts and figures. They're hallowed information that everybody has access to. They're almost worshipped in baseball, because that's all about numbers. And that drives engagement too. It's not just about the fantasy aspect of it, but that's the start of it. You start by having those fantasy numbers. Okay, well, who has the most try assists? That should be a huge thing. Who's setting up other people for tries? Who's the best teammate you got out there? The rugby really needs to make those widespread for everyone to know. Or if you follow fantasy sports or fantasy rugby, yeah, you might be able to find some of that in an offhand way. But these are things that can really grow the sport. It's not just the fantasy engagement. It's also, what else can you do to market your sport and your product? And having all these numbers behind paywalls, you gotta have one unified. Like, this is the Bible of who's doing what in the Prem and in other competitions, would really open up engagement. Like between, you can be talking smack. Okay, Slightholm versus Roddy Sagan. Who's better? Well, Sagan has, he beats 3 defenders a game. Slightholm, whatever. Like, you can have that should be a fun conversation for kids to have, and then develop that habit into adulthood.
The biggest fantasy sport over by a country mile, as you can imagine, is fantasy football, fantasy soccer. I'm going to say it.
Yep.
Fantasy Premier League.
That's
I play it.
It's the one thing that's been successful, but off the back of it, there's a lot of different statistics coming out of it, and there's generally a sort of a reluctance to talk about something. Now, a lot of them that are coming out I look at them and I go, that is absolutely meaningless. Like the expected number of assists, that's not a necessary stat for your casual fan, because you want the actual number of assists. But what you're talking about in rugby is very, very key metrics to how a team is doing. That, like you say, we don't really get to know an awful lot about. I mean, you might get a player who's named man of the match by the commentary team because they've noticed he's made 25 tackles in a game. But you're right, there's just not a lot of general chat about, very important things like meters made, tackles made, especially players in the second row. They do a lot of unseen work. And if you can dig out some numbers that actually support what we're saying about certain players, it would be a huge benefit, definitely.
Because now we're stuck on, there's obviously players that much as we try to grow the game, there's players that maybe we're not huge fans of. So let's take, for example, one of Jarrod's favorite players. I never cared for him that much, but Jarrod never stops talking about the guy. Let's talk about like a Dave Ewers, right?
Oh God!
Like you said, he may make 20 tackles a game, and he may take 20 carries a game, but he's taking 20 carries for like 5 meters. And so are we really
Total.
supposed to be impressed by that? Like, yeah, 5 meters total. And it's like, and that goes for actually a lot of the Exeter players who will have those, look at these carries from Ethan Roots, carries and tackles. But like, how much of an impact does that make on the game? That kind of conversation we don't really have. We don't have the enough of the information to have that kind of conversation. I mean, except the eye test, which only gets you so far. It's good to have, it's fun to have, stats to back it up. You don't have that argument if you don't have enough information to back anything up. It's like, well, I like this person. I like that person. Okay, then that's it.
Fine.
That's. I mean, I've got a similar example from that with Mike Brown. I've got a big thing against Mike Brown. He's always towards the top of meters made statistics. You always see that one, but it's because for a fullback, he's a terrible kicker. So all he does, he gets the ball kicked to him and he goes, well, I've just got to run in a straight line because that's all I've been capable of doing in my career. And he can't pass either. So it's just run as far as he can and occasionally he'll break the line. And that's the only reason he's top of that. Anyway, what I have managed to do is we've discussed fantasy rugby without me saying how well I'm doing in your fantasy rugby.
Women's league. I was going to talk about how terrible I'm doing.
But look, gents, it's been great talking to you both. It's been a long time coming. I think we've tried to do this maybe for about a year now. So it's good to finally get it. And just for anyone who's listening that has any even passing interest in joining a fantasy rugby game at the moment, the Premiership Fantasy Rugby is on Super Brew, and you can find a host of tournaments on there. The Champions Cup starting this weekend would be a good one to get involved in. And for these two gents as well, if you've found anything that they've said tonight remotely interesting, which I really hope you have, because I certainly have, Fantasy Rugby Yanks podcast is available in all good and terrible podcast places. I listen on Spotify all the time. I listen to your podcast more than I listen to ours, to be honest, because I hate listening to the sound of my voice. But
I'm not a fan of my voice either, personally. I let someone else have it.
I agree.
But yeah, definitely check it out because a huge amount of insight on both men's and women's rugby across the board. And it's not a Saracens focus necessarily, but they definitely should have one. And hopefully we'll get you guys back on the show again just to see what's going on. But I'll let Ben. You must be starving by now, and you're.
Yeah, prop can only last so long past noon.
But yeah, Jarrod, Ben, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us on the Faircast. We'll hopefully speak to you soon.
Yeah, Barty, thanks for having us, man. Have a good one.
This is the Fezcast.